Another interesting tool that we can use in JavaScript are array iteration methods. And these are methods that actually iterate over an array and call a function. And you get to write the function, and then you can use these iteration methods to move through it. So let's do one for an example. So here, we're going to only go over 3 of these. There's actually a lot of them, but we're just going to go over the first 3. So there's a foreach is one of the array methods that we can use, and it'll iterate over it. And each time it'll take the first element, and it will call that function with the first element, with the value. Now, each of these methods have values that get passed as parameters automatically. So notice here we have a value, an index, and an array. So 45 would have, the first element would have the value of 45, the index would be 0, and the array is the entire array. The next element, the value is 4, the index is 1, and the array is the entire array. On this particular function, the only value that's being, or the only one of these parameters being used is the value. So if we scroll down here, it shows that you don't have to use all 3, but that you can just use the one that you're going to use. So in this case, we don't have to list all 3 of them as parameters. We can just list the one that we're going to use. So let's look at this example where we just have value as the parameter. So and let's see what's happening. So here we create this string that's an empty string. We have this array numbers that lists all of the numbers. And then we use this iteration method foreach, and we specify what function to call. So that's what the foreach method expects. It expects a function. And notice it's just the name of the function. There's not parentheses. And this would be a case where you could use an anonymous function there. If you write the entire function definition, you don't need to name it, and that would be an anonymous function. And what it does is it's going to take that text value, and it's going to be set it equal to text plus value and a break. And then it's going to print it out. So let's see what it does. Now it's going to call this function 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So when you call foreach, it'll loop through this array, it'll call this function 5 times, and then it will move to the next line. So let's kind of figure out how that's happening. So numbers, here's the array. We get to numbers.foreach my function. So it says, okay, send 45 here. So it takes text, that empty string, and it sets it equal to empty plus 45 plus break. Then it calls the function with a 4, and it says take the text, which now has 45 and a break, and it says now add that 45 and a break, add to that 4 and a break. Then it calls it with 9. It says, okay, now what you already have, go ahead and take what you have and add to that a 9 and a break. And it calls it with 16. Okay, take what you have already, add to that a 16 and a break. Then it calls it with 25. And it says, take what you've got so far, add the 25 and the break. And that's what this line does. It calls that function 5 times, once for each element in the array. If you had an array with 100 elements, it would call that function 100 times. If you had an array with 2 elements, it would call that function 2 times. And then after it's done calling that function, however many times however many array elements there are, then it will go to the next line and it says, okay, write out what you've got in that text. And here's what it wrote: 45 break, 4 break, 9 break, 16 break, and 25 break. And that's how it iterated through it. And so this is an array iteration method that allows you to call a function over and over again, once for each element in the array. Now let's talk a little bit about this idea that it has multiple arguments. In this case, we only used the first one, which was value. And it really doesn't care what you call that first parameter, but it really cares what order the first parameter is in. So if I try this one and I say, oh, well, I actually, instead of having the value, I want you to print out the index, and I change the name to index here, and I change the index to here, and I run it, I get exactly the same thing. It doesn't care what the name is. So what it does care is the order. And the first parameter is value. And if that's the only one you're going to use, then you don't need to list any others. But if you want to use the index, then you have to put the first argument will be the value and the second one will be the index. And again, you can call it anything you want. In this case, I called it index, and then inside here, I used that second argument index, not the first argument, but the second argument, and I run that, and then I get the index. Now I can use both of them, right? I can say, oh, let's also get the value, and let's put a space in there. And then that will give me both. Now I'm using both arguments, the value and the index. There I get the value and the index. So there are 3 arguments that you can use. There are 3 arguments that are sent automatically, and you can use them by listing them as a parameter. But it doesn't matter what name you use in the parameter, but it does matter what order those are in. And you'll see that for the other iteration methods as well.